I've been watching your series on spiritual awakening. As you can probably tell, I've been commenting on some of your videos and loving it, obviously. But there was something that caught me at the very beginning of part one, something that you mentioned. And I appreciate the analytical lens that you bring to your videos, but I'm looking for the actual story here. What happened to you in 2017?
Okay, yeah, that's a story. So as a teacher, teaching in Thailand, you get a couple months off. And I had a big bucket list of things that I wanted to do. And one of those things was a 10-day silent meditation retreat, a Vipassana retreat. And the one that I chose at Suan Mok is very stringent. It's very ascetic. And so you sleep on like a marble bed, like a stone bed thing with like a wood pillow. You meditate from 12:30 in the morning to 9:30 at night. You eat a bowl of rice. It's insane. And I had meditated like off and on for a lot of my life, but I just kind of went from 0 to 100, like jumped way into the deep end. And not sure I would recommend that because it definitely was, it was a difficult experience for me for a couple of reasons. One was it brought up a lot of things that I hadn't entirely processed. And two was it was the first time I became aware of the voice in my head. Eckhart Tolle talks about it as being the ego, right? And the issue with this voice, this narrative, this story that we're always hearing in our heads is that we often identify with it and think that that's us. And there's a moment where you realize that you're actually what Eckhart Tolle calls the watcher behind the thinker. And that moment happened for me at the meditation camp where I started to disassociate from this sort of like unhappy voice, this critical voice in my head. And I was like, that's not what I am. It's a story that I'm telling myself. And that pretty much is, I think, standard for people who meditate. You'll often have that experience of processing things mentally, emotionally, and then also the experience of becoming aware of your ego. And then there was another layer to this for me, which I guess some people would call a mystical experience. About a weekend, I got really sick. I had a rash all over my body and I just generally felt ill. And so I went to the people at the camp and I was like, I'm going to go see a doctor in Bangkok. So I signed out, caught a sleeper train to Bangkok. And as I'm falling asleep on the train, I start to go into this different kind of space, and like my throat closes, constricts. I feel like I can't breathe. Heart is pounding. My body feels like it's on fire. My hands go numb. And I'm convinced I'm dying. So long story made short, I make them stop the train in the middle of the jungle. They call an ambulance and they take me to a hospital and they look me over and they're like, "You're fine. You're just on drugs." And I was like, "I'm not on drugs." Like that did not happen unless someone like slipped something in the freaking vegetable stew at the meditation camp. Like it didn't happen. But they couldn't find anything wrong with me. So they gave me a shot of antihistamines. I don't know why. And then they put me on a bus and continued on my way to Bangkok. And about 45 minutes into this, it starts to happen again where I'm going into this just strange feeling of, I was just convinced I was going to die. It was like physically painful and mentally uncomfortable. And so because I was embarrassed about having made a scene on the train, I was like, I'm just going to go down to the bathroom and die quietly in peace, not disturb anyone. That was like literally my train of thought. And so I go down to the bathroom, and as if it isn't already trippy enough, again, not on drugs, but it does kind of feel like the way I've heard people describe psychedelics. This bathroom has mirrors for walls and for a ceiling. And so I sit down, the only place I can, on the toilet, and I'm in this state of feeling like I'm going to die. And it looks like there's just infinite reflections on every side of me. And again, convinced I'm going to die. And I think back to one of the things that the monk said at the meditation camp, which is that if you focus intently enough on your breath, you'll know what it feels like to take your last breath. And so part of, I think, meditation is preparing ourselves for what it would be like to die. And so I started to focus on my breath. And as this happened, it was sort of like being in two places at once. On one hand, there was me sitting in this bathroom, feeling like I was going to die and meditating. And, you know, normally consciousness feels like it's centered like right here, like right behind your eyes. You're like a little pilot, right between your eyebrows or something. And it felt like expanding sort of like upwards and outwards, and was looking down at myself, and watched as it wasn't like a hallucination, like it wasn't intense, but it was almost dreamlike, like being in a waking dream, where there was a version of me sitting up, there was me, like my physical body, and then this version of me that would fall out onto the floor and kind of like dissipate into the floorboards, and then it would happen again and again. And I was just up here watching this happen for what turned out to be 2 hours, because what snapped me out of it was someone knocking on the bathroom door being like, "Hey, we're in Bangkok." And I get off the train and I'm absolutely hysterical, like, because it completely rattled what I thought was real. And I was convinced that either I was dying or going crazy. It was just a very earth-shattering experience for me. And so someone takes me to the hospital. They look me up and down again. They're like, no, you're just on drugs. And so they give me a shot of antihistamines. I don't know what it was with antihistamines. And they sent me on my way. And I was so scared after that that I couldn't leave my apartment for like 3 weeks. And I was supposed to go back and teach. And I ended up just catching a plane home and living with my parents for a while. And after that, for about 2 years, I had all kinds of weird physical symptoms, things that were seemingly unrelated. And I thought, like, again, I thought I was either going crazy after that experience or dying. And so I was like, I have a brain tumor or an autoimmune disorder or something. And so I was in and out of hospitals, seeing doctors, naturopaths, because the symptoms were very real. There was the possibility that it was just anxiety. Oh, and the other thing that I developed was panic attacks, which I had never had before. And so I thought, there's the possibility that it was just, I had suddenly developed anxiety and panic attacks, but there were like a slew of physical symptoms too, where I would get boils on my body. I would get rashes. I would again have these fits where it felt like my entire body was on fire. There was a summer I woke up and I couldn't turn my head. It was like, this was all paralyzed. It was like waking up with whiplash. I would have dizzy spells where I would see flashing lights and I would go deaf in my left ear and like fall over. It was really strange. And so I was convinced that it was something neurological or autoimmune. And it wasn't until I always wondered if it might have some sort of like psychospiritual or energetic cause, because what had triggered it was the meditation camp. But I still couldn't really reconcile this experience that I had had with what I believed reality was, having like come out of my body, right? And so it was sort of this tug of war for like 2 years where I was like, well, maybe I'm not crazy. Maybe that was a real experience and what I'm experiencing is kind of the fallout from that. Or maybe I'm crazy. And it wasn't until I really started seriously considering that it had like a spiritual cause that I stopped having panic attacks and the physical symptoms went away, which was really strange. And at that point, that's when I really took the dive into what a spiritual awakening is. And I haven't figured out all the pieces. It's kind of what I'm in the process of, and sort of sharing what I find as I go on Idea Sex. But that was the experience, and what it's led me to is really wanting to connect these mystical and spiritual experiences with evidence, with data, with any kind of science I can get my hands on. And obviously, like, this isn't something that's studied in the mainstream, so it's taken me some kind of fringe places, but it's exciting. I've been tumbling down the rabbit hole for a while now.